Part 1. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 1. Chapter 1 Tragic Death and Ruined Temple. Suburban Beijing, the backyard of Lanjiao Nunnery. The howling cold wind blew through the cracks in the window, chilling people's bones. Suleun, dressed in grey plain clothes, knelt on the futon, twirling Buddhist beads in his hand and reciting scriptures silently. She was expelled from her husband's family and spent half a year in Lanjiao Temple introspection. The hysteria when I first came here is gone, and I feel calm now. All things are determined by fate, and you cannot blame others. Only for her mother, brother, and grandfather, she felt guilty. She was already married when her mother was seriously ill. She was trapped in the small space of the Li family. She was unable to serve the soup at the bedside, and she did not even see her mother for the last time. My grandfather was framed and dragged his old body to the battlefield. He died on the battlefield together with his brother. His body has not yet been recovered. In this world, all the people who truly loved her are gone. The door opened with a creak from the outside. A proud female voice sounded along with the sound of soft footsteps. The dignified daughter-in-law of the Marquis was reduced to the countryside, and I was forced to occupy this beautiful family background for 14 years. Now she is in such a situation, being controlled by others. It's really ridiculous. Suleun paused slightly with the Buddhist beads on his fingertips. Su Weiner raised her hand and asked the guards to bring the person up. Let me go, let me go. Two girls, also dressed in grey plain clothes, struggled, and the guards grabbed their arms and forced them into the door. Lotus Heart, Green Willow. Suleun's eyes were shocked. If you have any big reason, come to me, so there is no need to embarrass these two girls. Su Weiner pinched her chin and looked bitterly at this face that was bright and moving even without makeup. A sinister smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he ordered the guards in a cold voice. Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, the long sword pierced his chest, and the blood fell to the ground along the grey coarse cloth. In a moment, it gathered in a small pool, and the green willow lost its life before his eyes. Suleun's hands were powerless, so the guards cut her hands behind her back and pressed them together with Lian Xin. Suleun's eyes were full of sadness, but also had a bit of determination that would destroy both the jade and the stone. Su Weiner, although I was expelled to Lanjiao Nunnery by the Li family, Li Rui did not divorce his wife. I am still the wife of a Hanlin bachelor. I will make you pay for what you have done today. Su Weiner laughed loudly with contemptuous eyes. Mrs. Bachelor, do you think the Li family will stand up for you? Do you know why Brother Rui suddenly agreed to marry you? Because I complained to him that you were bullying me at home every day because of your status as my legitimate daughter. He married you into the Li mansion just to make my life easy. Suleun was stunned. So that's it? No wonder he has never been willing to touch her since they got married, and even found unfounded charges to expel her from the Li mansion. Looking at Suleun's shocked look, Su Weiner's smile became even brighter. She took out a dagger from her sleeve and slowly pierced the lotus heart. Well. Lian Xin gritted her teeth and refused to cry out in pain. Suleun was stunned, but he was held tightly by the guards. Good sister, don't worry, I'll be with you soon. Su Weiner pulled out the dagger, and the cold blade fell on Suleun's face, sliding thinly, and blood streaks slid down the fair skin. Suleun seemed to feel no pain, and just stared at Su Weiner. You are the last member of the Sun family. Only if you die can we feel at ease. Suleun forced himself to calm down, his thoughts turning quickly. Grandfather Sun Shao was a dignified general who protected the country. He was upright, honest, and courageous, so how could he be framed for no reason? My elder brother is a straightforward man and is well versed in the art of war. At the age of 13, he went to the frontier with his grandfather to practice. He has rich experience. How could he be greedy for merit and rush forward, leading to the annihilation of the entire army. Now that I think about it, the death of my grandfather and brother is full of weirdness. Is your grandfather's death related to you? Sulayun asks Suwainer with cold eyes. I'm not that capable. It's just that he was on the wrong team and took care of things he shouldn't have. Suwainer smiled sinisterly and spoke proudly. Oh, considering that you are about to die, I can't help but say a few more words. Although Sun Xiao's matter has nothing to do with me, your mother's death was my own fault. I feel sorry for her lingering on the sick bed, waiting to see you for the last time. Suwainer, she is also your mother after all, how could you do it? Sulayun's eyes were so wide open that his face was covered with blood stains. He looked very horrifying. Who told you that she only has eyes for you? You can't blame me for this. If you want to blame me, I blame you for not coming back. You should have died in Ljia village. Suwainer gritted her teeth and stabbed the dagger into Sulayun's chest with her backhand. Severe pain bloomed, and Sulayun was thrown to the ground like a rag by the guard. With strong hatred in his eyes, he looked in the direction Suwainer left. She hates it. She hates it. With blood loss and his body getting colder, Sulayun became drowsy. When he was dying, his eyes fell on the Buddha statue on the case. Jingzhou City, in room number 1, Tianzi. Cold, so cold. The candle light was flickering, and the bath water with rose petals floating in it had cooled down. A girl with a gloomy face and a thin body was leaning naked against the wall of the barrel, her eyes closed tightly, and she hugged her shoulders shiveringly. Sulayun shivered in a daze, and two female voices, deliberately lowered, could be heard vaguely in his ears. The legitimate daughter is back, what will the family do? Didn't the old lady say that everything will remain as usual, except that there is an extra second lady in the family? Obviously she is her biological legitimate daughter, but now she has to be the second young lady after her adopted daughter. The old lady is really partial. Why is the old lady so partial? Look at this person inside. In terms of conversation and grooming, she can't even compare to us high-ranking maids, let alone Miss Wanner. The long eyelashes like butterfly wings fluttered and slowly opened, and the eyes changed from confusion to clarity. Looking around at the simple furnishings of the inn, Sulayun raised a sneer on his lips. God was merciful and gave her a chance to start over. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 Rebirth. In her previous life, she was taken back to the Su family and stayed at this inn. She heard the same contemptuous words from the maid. 14 years ago, there was a plague in Kyoto, and the female relatives of high-ranking families took refuge in the Bi temple. Mrs. Suhao, who was about to give birth in 10 months, was also among them. Mrs. Ho gave birth to her legitimate daughter Sulayun in the Bi temple. Sulayun was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. She was supposed to have a life of peace and prosperity, but unfortunately, by mistake, she was seduced by a rough woman with her own daughter and lived in exile between the countryside. Sulayun suffered endless hardships from doing endless rough work and enduring endless beatings and scoldings for 14 years. It was not until someone from the Su family came to find her that she found out that she was the legitimate daughter of the Ho family. After returning to the Su family and reunited with her flesh and blood, she thought her good life was about to begin, but unexpectedly she fell into another abyss. Although she is the legitimate daughter of the Su family, she grew up in the mountains and fields since she was a child. She lacked food and clothing, and her life was difficult, let alone other things. His manners and dress are not as good as those of his adopted daughter Suwainer, who grew up in the Ho mansion. In such a large house, the only people who truly treated her were her mother and brother. Suho only had fame and power in his heart, and did not care about her biological daughter at all. As for Mrs. Su, her biological grandmother was devoted to favoring Suwainer, who had been raised under her since childhood, and suppressed her at every turn. She even once said that she was vulgar and despicable and unworthy of Su. The heartbreaking words of my family. Suleun thought that he was not as good as Suwana in everything, so he was not liked by the Su family, so he worked hard to learn etiquette and rules, poetry, calligraphy and musical instruments, ordering tea and arranging flowers. She endured the pain and corrected and polished herself bit by bit, not only to gain recognition from everyone in the Su family, but also to be worthy of him, Li Rui, the eldest son of the Li Hanlin family. Li Rui has been engaged to the Su family's legitimate daughter since he was a child. Suleun fell hopelessly in love with him at the first sight. However, the only Su family's legitimate daughter in his eyes was Su Wainer. In order to marry Li Rui, she threw away the modesty of a girl and did everything to please her. In order to let her get her wish, her mother knelt in front of the old man's door for 3 days and 3 nights and begged, even at the expense of inviting her maternal grandfather, General Sunday apply pressure. Finally, she got her wish and married into the Li family. She thought she could live a harmonious life with the one she loved, but it turned out to be the opposite. In the end, a family member died tragically and did not end well. Fortunately, God showed mercy and gave her another chance. Suwanur, I'm back. Let's settle the grudges from the past life slowly. The cold bath water made Suleun sneeze. She put her thoughts back and called the 2 gossiping girls outside to come in with towels and clothes to serve her. As expected, the 2 girls pretended not to hear as they did in the previous life. In her previous life, she was submissive and didn't dare to shout. She didn't get out of the cold bathtub until Nanny John came in with the tonic she had fried herself. With a cold light flashing in his eyes, Suleun swung all the bottles and cans on the small table next to the bathtub to the ground. There was a crackling sound of broken porcelain, and 2 maids hurriedly ran in from the outside. Aunt Zhang arrived shortly after, and was startled when she saw the broken pieces on the ground. Hurriedly, he took a bath towel and wrapped it in Suleun, then slowly wiped himself. Mammy Zhang was an old man who stayed with Su's mother. During the most difficult period in the Li family in her previous life, she was always by Suleun's side. She only regretted that in the end, Suleun couldn't even give her a coffin. "Miss, are you hurt? What's going on?" Suleun rolled up his satin pajamas with slightly longer sleeves, raised his eyebrows and looked at the 2 maids standing at the door, and said in a cold voice, "If not, how could I have moved them in?" After saying this, Granny Zhang walked up to the 2 girls with a sullen face and gave them each a hard slap in the face. The 2 girls covered their faces and knelt on the ground. The girl in the pink dress frowned and defended, "Mommy, we are not to blame for this. It's because the lady's voice was too quiet and we didn't hear it." The girl who spoke was named Suihuan, who was specially sent by Su Wainer to show her off. She was the one who stopped another girl from coming in. In her previous life, Suleun got cold due to this and was very sick all the way. When she was approaching Kyoto, she fell into the moat again and almost lost her life. Suleun snorted coldly, walked up to the girl who was speaking, and lifted her chin with one hand. "I advise you to put aside those petty ideas that are not worthy of publicity. I can't take care of the master behind you for a moment, but I can take care of you, a humble little girl." Facing those cold star-like eyes, Shuehuan couldn't help but flinch, lowering her eyebrows and not daring to speak. "Humbling in my heart, the submissive country girl seems to have become a different person after taking a bath. The air that flows through her body makes her look like she really is a noble lady." Suleun saw their surprise in his eyes and secretly clenched the fingers hidden in his sleeves. After resurrecting her life, she not only has to protect the people around her, but also tells those who have despised her, used her, and bullied her, what it means to be respected as a legitimate daughter. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 3. Chapter 3, Obtaining a Promise from the King of Jinn. After washing herself, Sulayun allowed her grandma to apply moisturizing balm all over her body. Sandalwood and ointment are mixed together, forming a wonderful sweetness. She dismissed her maids and servants, changed into her pajamas, sat quietly in front of the dressing table, and wiped her face carefully in front of the bronze mirror. The person in the mirror has yet to open his eyebrows and eyes. Although his complexion is not good, he can't hide his charming look. His face is as big as a palm and is delicate and charming. His eyebrows are crooked whether he is smiling or not. Across the way, Sulayun was about to go to bed when someone knocked open the window from the outside. Before she could react, a sharp dagger was pressed against her neck, and the cool touch made her shiver. "Who are you?" Looking at the young man in front of him who was dressed in luxurious clothes and whose shoulders were stained with blood, Sulayun frowned slightly, but there was no hint of timidity in his eyes. Searching through her past life memories, she remembered that the man in front of her who was in a state of embarrassment but still had the same character was Prince Jin, the unlucky highness who was besieged by tigers at the Kiowa hunting ground and killed on the spot. "It's better that you don't know who I am if you want to survive, just keep silent and send the people outside." The male voice was hoarse and cold, and his hawk-like eyes fell on Sulayun with pressure. Sulayun looked calm and spoke out to fight back. "Kill me and it will be difficult for you to get out alive." As soon as he finished speaking, there were dense footsteps outside and a loud knock on the door. Have you seen a young man in black clothes? Search from room to room." The people had already chased him to the door. Sulayun raised his eyebrows and looked at King Jin teasingly. King Jin's eyes darkened, and he put down the dagger in his hand. The woman in front of him seemed weak, but she could not be controlled by strong methods. "Tell me, what do you want?" Sulayun's eyebrows moved slightly, and his gaze dropped to Prince Jin's waist. "With the jade pendant as proof, I want you to promise me a promise." "What do you want me to do?" Jin Wang raised the corners of his lips unconsciously. "This girl is quite interesting. Most people would be scared to death at least half of their lives when they meet a robber with a knife, but it's good that she still has the energy to bargain with him here." Took the jade pendant from his waist and stuffed it into Sulayun's hand. "As you wish." Kanyu started, and the touch was delicate and cold. Although Sulayun didn't understand jade, he also knew that this thing was worth $1,000. "Make a deal." Sulayun put the jade pendant into his sleeve, then took out a token and held it in his hand. He winked at King Jin and asked him to hide in the inner room. Although she doesn't want to get involved too much with King Jin, it's always good to get him a guarantee. This time she returns to the capital. What she wants to do is extremely difficult, and if she doesn't get enough guarantees, she will blame King Jin. A rough knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Open the door." "My lords, this is my lady's boudoir. I'm afraid it's inconvenient for you to go in." Mammy Zhang blocked the door and did not allow officials to enter. "Since it's the lady's boudoir, it's even more important to search it. If a thief breaks in and injures the lady, wouldn't we be derelict in our duty?" After saying that, the officer was about to force his way in. At this time, the door opened a small crack, and a token was handed out, with the words Guardian General Sun Shao engraved on it. "The token was specially requested by my mother from my grandfather, in order to have 10,000 on the road, and the title of the general who protects the country would ensure the safety of my beloved daughter." Mammy Zhang understood and took the token and waved it in front of the officer's eyes. "Our lady is the granddaughter of General Sunday. Her daughter's family attaches great importance to honor and integrity, so you officials might as well do it for your convenience." After speaking softly and hard, the leader hesitated slightly, gritted his teeth and left with fists in hand. "That's all. It's more important to find what the thief is holding. Let's continue searching elsewhere. The purpose of their trip is not very honorable. If they really cause trouble and alert the superiors, no one will be in trouble." The sound of people faded away, and King Jin came out of the room, his sharp eyes falling on the token in Suleun's hand. Are you the daughter of the Su Hao family? Zhenqiu General Sun Shao had only one daughter in his life, who was married to the Su family. With the help of the Sun family, the Su family rose from a poor family to the position of a marquis. Su Weiner, the beloved daughter of Mr. Su, was a well-known and talented woman in Kyoto. He had met her from a distance several times during the palace banquet, but she was clearly not the one in front of him. Oh, yes, she should be the sister Suye mentioned a few days ago who was carried by the wrong person. Okay, I'll remember you. After saying this, Jin Wang Tathagata climbed out of the window and disappeared after a few ups and downs. Seeing that the person was gone, Suleun closed the window and took out the jade pendant in his sleeve to play with again. Prince Jin was originally the most promising prince to win the title of heir, but it's a pity. Miss, are you okay? Mammy Zhang knocked on the door outside. Suleun hurriedly put the jade pendant into his sleeve. Unless it was a reward, it was against the rules for ordinary people to wear a dragon-patterned pendant. Come in, I'm fine. Pushing the door open and coming in, Granny Zhang put the freshly cooked bird's nest porridge on the small table and asked with concern, "We've been having trouble in the middle of the night, are you scared?" Suleun picked up the silver spoon and stirred the bird's nest, showing everyone's style in every move. "I am the daughter of the Sun family, so this setback is nothing." Mammy Zhang looked at Suleun with a face full of joy. She was really worried about her when she first received the daughter-in-law. She lived a poor life for more than 10 years, and her eldest daughter was submissive and acted like a petty person. Such a person would probably be eaten to the bone in the Su mansion. Aunt Zhang has tried to persuade her several times, and it seems that the young lady has listened. After all, half of the Sun family's blood remains in him, and this noble heir is natural. "Miss, rest early, we have to go on a journey tomorrow." Mama Zhang stepped back. Suleun looked at the direction King Jin was leaving and pressed his forehead. After her rebirth, things happened one after another, and she finally had time to sort out the events of her previous life. In his previous life, his elder brother Suye was the companion of the king of Jin. His grandfather was an honest man and did not like party disputes. If he had to take sides, the one most likely to support was the king of Jin. Unfortunately, he died early and did not participate in the subsequent battle for the right to inherit the throne. Then why are we on the wrong team? Who are Su Weiner and the person behind her? Who wants to put my grandfather to death? In this life, as long as she guarded her mother well and prevented Su Weiner from having a chance to attack her, she could protect her. But what should her grandfather and brother do? Suleun's thoughts were in confusion. Sometimes he was thinking about his past life, and sometimes he felt that what happened just now was strange. The king of Jin was a legitimate prince after all, so how could he be forced into such a predicament by the government officials? Who wants to attack him? Will my brother be implicated? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Falling into the River. After a night of tossing and turning, Suleun slowly fell asleep when the sky was slightly brighter. "Miss, she looks bad, but was she scared last night?" In front of the bronze mirror, the little girl was dressing her up and applying gouache a little thicker. Suleun looked lazy and let the little girl dress up. "Where is Aunt Zhang?" "There was a bandit last night, but no one has been caught yet. The official has sealed the city gate and no one is allowed to go in or out." Nanny Zhang took the token to the local magistrate and asked if she could be accommodating and allow us to leave the city. After last night, the little girl didn't dare to wait for Suleun any longer, and answered her questions in detail. Looking sideways at the falling snowflakes outside the window, Suleun recalled what happened last night. They went to war for the king of Jin and even closed the city. They don't know why. I think the king of Jin should have escaped by this time. That's all, it's a royal matter, so what does it have to do with her? Smiling in relief, Suleun said slowly, I think it's okay to stay here for a little longer. As soon as he finished speaking, Nanny Zhang opened the door and came in. She shook off the snowflakes on her body and explained, as the new year is approaching, Madam hopes that you will go back early so that she can ask the clan leader to open an ancestral hall to write a family tree for you before the end of the year. Only when she is listed in the genealogy, Suleun can be regarded as the real legitimate daughter of the Suhao mansion, and can she legitimately participate in the palace banquets and banquets held by other mansions during the new year. Mammy Zhang took the silver comb from the girl's hand, and Su Su explained, Madam wants to take advantage of the New Year's holiday when she is traveling around various places to clear your name, so that you can gain a foothold in the high gates of the capital. Suleun nodded to indicate that he understood, but his face said lightly, Masters his who, have you agreed? Mammy sighed and shook her head, this old slave is useless. Then let's wait patiently in these few days, Mama can talk more about family matters with me. Suleun didn't care much. Except for her mother and brother, there was no one in the family she wanted to see. What the lady said is, as long as you can go back in time to celebrate the new year. Mama Zhang felt relieved, followed Suleun's wishes, sat down next to her, and talked about the affairs of the Sun and Su families. 6 days later, a gorgeously decorated troika was leisurely walking on the bluestone road in the capital, with bells hanging from the 4 corners of the roof ringing. There was a charcoal fire burning in the carriage, and it was as warm as spring. New tea was brewing on the table, a copper stove was slowly smelling sandalwood, and several plates of pastries and preserves were not touched much. Miss, we are about to enter the mansion. Do you remember everything I have told you these days? Mother Zhang asked worriedly. Suleun nodded. In the past few days, Grandma Zhang had been talking to her about everyone in the family and everything in order to prevent her from showing timidity in front of everyone. Don't worry, Mama, I've written it all down. As soon as he finished speaking, the carriage stopped suddenly. Unprepared for a moment, Suleun leaned forward and almost hit the burning incense burner. Mammy Zhang hurriedly supported the person and looked up and down. Miss, did you bump into something? Suleun shook his head and straightened the crooked incense burner to show that he was fine. Mama Zhang felt relieved at this moment, opened the curtain of the car and said sternly, how did you drive the car? If miss, I'll see who can afford it. The coachman was from the Ho family, and he repeatedly complained, Mom, don't be angry, someone is making trouble up front, I didn't mean to startle the young lady. The carriage stopped in front of the Kyoto Bridge. The officers and soldiers on the bridge seemed to be arresting someone. There were many people watching the excitement around, and the carriage could not pass. Mammy Zhang frowned. If she wanted to enter the city, she had to cross the Kyoto Bridge. If she took a detour, she would have to walk more than half a day. Just when I didn't know what to do, a familiar boy came running over. Mother Zhang, the government knows that the bridge is difficult to cross, so they have sent a sedan to wait at the other end of the bridge. Please get off the car and walk a few steps, so as not to miss the time to return to the government. Mama Zhang turned around and got into the car, helping Suleun out of the car. The breeze blew by, fluttering the streamers on her skirt. Suleun looked down at the entire moat, and all kinds of feelings came to his heart. In her previous life, she fell into the river inexplicably while walking on a bridge. She was rescued by Li Rui when she was desperate and helpless. From then on, she was obsessed with the destiny of marriage. When she married into the Li family, the sedan chair also passed through this moat, which she recognized as a matchmaker. Now that I think about it, it's all bad luck. Stepping lightly, Suleun walked carefully as he stepped onto the bridge, trying to walk in the middle of the road to avoid a recurrence of the scene in his previous life. Halfway across the bridge, a group of children watching the excitement came over, pushing and fighting regardless. Sulayun saw a girl who was unsteady on her feet and slammed into the bridge pillar. In this collision, the head may be broken and bleeding, and the worst may be death. Without caring about anything else, Sulayun hurriedly grabbed her. The little girl was okay. Before she could stand firmly, she was pushed over the fence by a hand and fell into the river. Sulayun looked back and happened to meet Xuehuan's proud eyes. She is Suwainer's person, and I think she was the one who pushed her into the river in her previous life. After all, her master didn't want her to go back safely. The cold river water couldn't help pouring into her mouth and nose. Sulayun thought vaguely. She still couldn't escape the fate of falling into the water in her next life. Would she have to be rescued by Li Rui again? No, she has experienced all kinds of suffering in her previous life, and she does not want to have any interaction with him in this life. The feeling of suffocation became stronger and stronger. Sulayun opened her mouth wide and tried to breathe. More and more cold water poured in. Just when her eyesight turned black, a pair of warm palms wrapped around her waist. Consciousness returned, his pupils suddenly opened wide, and a handsome and resolute face magnified in front of his eyes. It's the King of Jinn. Why is he here? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 5. Chapter 5 Returning Home. Letting those strong arms bring her out of the water, and wrapping her tightly in a cloak, Sulayun's little face turned pale with cold, and she looked at King Jin shivering. Ms. Su, we meet again. Facing those sharp eyebrows, Sulayun frowned slightly, never expecting that she would meet Prince Jin again so soon. She wanted to reply, but her teeth were chattering and she couldn't speak. King Jin saw her trembling and couldn't help but hug her a little tighter. Sulayun wanted to break away, but had no extra strength, so she had to let the cold agarwood fragrance from the man's body surround her tightly. Mother Zhang and others gathered around in a hurry. Miss, are you okay? Sulayun shook his head and forced a smile to cheer him up. Thank you, sir, for saving my life. As he finished speaking, the loud sound of horse hooves approached. A tall man tightened the reins and dismounted. He took Sulayun from Prince Jin's arms and took off his cloak to cover her. He rushed back from the border after traveling thousands of miles and finally picked up his sister one step ahead of schedule. Mother Zhang, what's going on? Sulayun looked at the handsome man in front of her with her eyes red unconsciously. This was her biological brother, the brother she had risked her life to protect in her previous life. Her elder brother had been learning the art of war from her grandfather since she was a child. She never believed that he would die because of his greed for success on the battlefield. She will definitely protect him in his new life. Mama Zhang knelt down and apologized, young master, it's the old slave who failed to take good care of the young lady. Sulayun wiped away the tears from the corner of his eyes without leaving a trace, turned to Suya and smiled sweetly. You must be my brother. I was careless, so I don't blame grandma. Suya looked at this thin little sister who had been living outside for 15 years with distress, and wrapped her cloak tighter around her body. Thank you very much, His Highness King Jin, for rescuing my little sister. I will definitely come to pay my respects to you one day. Prince Jin looked at Sulayun playfully, and he was even more curious about this half-grown girl. She was a commoner who grew up in the countryside, but when she heard the name of Prince Jin, there was no trace of emotion on her face. You are my companion, why should you be so outspoken? Take your sister to change clothes quickly, so as not to catch a cold. Suya bowed his hand to King Jin, then took Sulayun on his horse and ran towards a separate courtyard of the Sun family. Sulayun took a bath and put on new clothes. After she finished cleaning up, a servant handed her a cup of tea to keep her away from the cold. Suya then saw his sister's true appearance clearly. Her eyebrows and eyes seemed to be carved from the same mold as her mother. When I saw him, I felt so intimate that it was hard to describe. This is the magic of blood connection. He has never been very close to Suwainer in his house, and has never felt this way. Is it better? Sulayun nodded, with some color on his face. With a little moisture in his eyes, he stared at his brother blankly. Suya was slightly relieved and frowned as he looked at the half-wet dragon-patterned cloak on the side. Yunur, are you an old acquaintance of the King of Jin? Suya has been working as a companion to King Jin for 6 years and knows him very well. King Jin has always been cold-hearted and never talks about matters that don't concern him. Now he saved Sulayun without saying anything and took the initiative to care about him. With his eyes lowered, Sulayun thought about it several times and shook his head lightly. It is better not to let my brother know what happened last night, so as not to worry him in vain. Suya breathed a sigh of relief, thinking about it. Sulayun was raised in the mountains, how could he know King Jin? King Jin's words and actions may be because he wanted to make good friends with the Sun and Su families through Sulayun. The evidence of seizing the legitimate son was about to happen. No matter what, he would not let his sister, who had finally found him, get involved and become a victim. Don't be afraid, sister, I will protect you. As soon as he finished speaking, Nanny John came in with a clean cloak. Miss, the master and his wife are still waiting at the house, let's go back now. Sulayun stood up, straightened her clothes, and with the support of her grandma, she got on the sedan chair in the mansion. She opened the curtain of the sedan chair and looked at the tall figure on horseback leading the way, feeling reassured in her heart. Suhao Mansion, she is back again. As soon as they got off the sedan chair, several women and girls ran to the main hall to report the news. The second lady is back. Suya frowned when he heard the word in this word. Sulayun was obviously his biological sister, but now she had to be ranked behind an outsider. I really don't know what her grandmother was thinking. Sulayun, on the other hand, had a calm expression on his face. He even tucked Suya's sleeves comfortingly to show that he didn't care. Entering the main hall, Mrs. Su sat at the head of the table, Suwaner stood waiting behind her, Mr. Su and Mrs. Ho sat at the lower end, and a futon had been placed on the ground in the middle early in the morning. Sulayun followed the rules of a noble lady in Kyoto, straightened her back, knelt on the ground upright, kowtowed and greeted her loudly. The unfilial daughter returns today to pay her respects to her grandmother, father, and mother. As soon as he finished speaking, Sun Jiaro's eyes turned red. She walked to Sulayun and helped her up. My miserable daughter, my mother has finally waited for you to come. Sulayun couldn't help but shed tears when she saw her mother again. It was so good that her mother would still be alive in the next life, and she had not yet suffered from the unknown disease. Sun Jiaro has a beautiful face and well-maintained face. She was known as the most beautiful woman in Kyoto back then. Now that she is older, she has become even more charming. Sulayun's facial features are as bright and attractive as hers, but her skin color is a bit dark and yellow. If she is willing to take good care of her, she will definitely become famous in the capital in time. When they met for the first time, mother and daughter hugged each other tightly and did not separate for a long time. The old lady coughed lightly as a reminder. It's a good thing that the child is back, why cry? Suhao had a calm expression on his face and agreed, that's right, don't cry anymore. Looking at the old-fashioned Su Changqing with cold features and cold eyes, Sulayun's eyes turned cold. Her biological father, Marquis Su Changqing, was an upstart in Kyoto and quite famous. Everyone envied her mother for marrying a good husband who did not take concubines and only doted on her. Only Sulayun knows that Su Changqing is just a ruthless and unrighteous person who deceives the world and steals reputation, and eats soft food by force. Long before marrying Sun Jiaro, Su Changqing had a secret affair with the daughter of his childhood sweetheart, the sinner. Not only did he have an extramarital affair, but he also had an illegitimate son who was older than Suye. In the previous life, before Sun Jiaro had even passed his 7th birthday, Su Changqing couldn't wait to welcome the eldest son into the house in a sedan chair. He even personally destroyed Suya and took away his title of eldest son and gave it to the eldest son. Good boy, stop crying. The soft voice full of pity and regret recalled her thoughts. Sun Gro heard the dissatisfaction in her mother-in-law's words, slowly let go of Suleun, took out a handkerchief to wipe her tears, then held her hand tightly, led her to sit next to him, and fixed her watery eyes on her. As if I can't get enough of it. Seeing this, the old lady pulled Suwaner to her and introduced her to Suleun. This is your eldest sister, Suwaner. You sisters should get along well with each other in the future. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 Genealogy. Suleun raised an imperceptible sneer at the corners of her lips. Her grandmother was indeed partial. She was afraid that Suwaner would be wronged, so she would go out of her way to express her identity as the eldest daughter. But little did he know that the person favoring him was just a white-eyed wolf. If it weren't for her, how could she have ended up in a grievance in her previous life? Sun Gro and Suye's expressions were not very good either. They didn't want to wrong Suleun, but they couldn't resist the old lady and the stupid and filial Su Changqing. Suleun has long seen through the mother and son and no longer has any expectations for them. She blessed Suwaner cooperatively, and looked at her with a cold look in her watery eyes. Sister Waner. Suwaner was wearing a pink brocade dress and a red gold crest on her head. She had obviously dressed up deliberately to make her feel ashamed. In his previous life, Suleun felt inferior to Suwaner for a long time after seeing her as a noble lady. She even hid in the house and didn't want to see anyone. But this time, she won't. Suleun pretended to look at Suwaner with envy, and said innocently, I felt friendly to Sister Waner as soon as I saw her. At first, I just thought she was good looking. After looking at her a few more times, I realized that my sister's eyebrows, eyes, and nose are similar to those of the Li family's father and mother. It's exactly the same. Suwaner's face immediately changed when her foot was stepped on, and she retorted sharply. You are talking nonsense, who is like those pair of untouchables? As soon as these words came out, everyone in the room changed their expressions. The old lady frowned slightly. Su Changqing placed the teacup on the table gently but not heavily. Sun Gro didn't pay attention. All she could see was her newly found daughter. Suwaner became more and more embarrassed as she looked at everyone's reactions, her face turned red and her eyes were covered with mist. Suleun raised the corners of his lips slightly, Suwaner, you can't bear it now. What should you do in the future? She pretended to be surprised, pursed her lips slightly, and said hesitantly, Sister Waner, you are so kind to me when you were born and raised. How can you call the parents of the Li family that way? As soon as these words came out, Suwaner's face became even more ugly. The wife of the Li family deliberately transferred her child to another one, so that Suwaner could replace Suleun and enjoy the life of a young lady in the Ho family for more than 10 years. Suleun is tolerant and generous. She thinks of their upbringing and calls her parents, but her biological daughter calls her parents untouchables. The girls below were talking a lot. Although the second lady is from the countryside, she is more emotional than the eldest lady. No, I didn't expect the eldest lady to be such a person. Seeing that Suwaner's eyes were red, the old lady coughed twice and helped her out. Okay, don't mention the Li family again in the future, as it will cause unhappiness. It's rare for a family to get together, so let's have dinner together. The ostentation of Suhao Mansion is always quite large. More than 30 dishes were served for a dinner, and the table was filled to the brim. Shark's fin, bird's nest, abalone. There are not many dishes on the table that Suleun can name by name, not to mention the etiquette at the table. In her previous life, she made a lot of jokes and went back to her yard crying before finishing the meal. The maid came over with fragrant soup for washing hands. Suwana's face was as usual. She stood up and looked at Sulayun provocatively. Sister Yunar has just arrived. How about I ask my sister to fulfill her filial duty today and serve my grandmother's meals? She didn't believe that Sulayun, a country girl who grew up in the countryside, could handle this. Sulayun saw her pride in his eyes, stood up with a smile, stood beside the old lady, took the fragrant soup and helped her clean her hands, and then took a clean silk handkerchief to dry them. From washing hands to rinsing mouth and serving dishes, the etiquette and rules are perfect, and the manners are elegant, just like the noble ladies in Kyoto. The old lady nodded with satisfaction. Sunjiro and Suye both looked at her with smiles, and Suho showed a rare kindness. Suwaner bit her lower lip lightly and said without giving up, "My sister has such good rules, she doesn't look like she grew up in the mountains at all." As soon as these words came out, the old lady's face turned a bit bad. Indeed, this behavior is not like the upbringing in the countryside. The Su family has already made a mistake about their daughter once and has become the laughing stock of Kyoto. If someone with good intentions takes advantage of her, and admits her mistake again, wouldn't it make people laugh out loud? Sulayun pursed his lips and chuckled, explaining in a slow voice. My granddaughter knows that the etiquette and rules are very different from those of ladies in Kyoto, so she asked Grandma Zhang for guidance along the way and learned a little bit. Aunt Zhang responded from the side. Miss, I have worked very hard all the way, just because I am afraid that we will lose the face of our marquee mansion when we get to Kyoto. After saying this, Sunjiro's eyes turned red again. If her miserable daughter had not been tricked by a poisonous woman since she was a child, how could she have been living outside and suffered so much, and now she has to worry about her own behavior when she comes back? She was supposed to grow up in a noble family, so why should she be so cautious? Thinking of this, Sunjiro looked at Suwaner with an increasingly unhappy look. This daughter had been raised in the old lady's room since she was a child, and she had never been close to her. She didn't think much about it at first, but now it seems that it is because of her blood. Mom will slowly replenish what you have lost over the past 10 years or so. Whether it is rules and etiquette, music, chess, calligraphy and painting, or pity and pampering. Li Yun's eyebrows and face shape are almost exactly the same as mine and the Marquise. She must be the daughter of my Su family. Under the table, Sunjiro tightened the handkerchief in her hand. She had missed her daughter for 15 years, and now that Sulayun was back with her, she would not let her daughter suffer any more injustice. Mother-in-law, husband, now that Yunar is back, it's time to create a family tree for her and reveal her identity. Sunjiro stood up, hugged Sulayun and sat next to her. She personally filled a bowl of soup for her and placed it next to her. Taking advantage of the good genealogy a year ago, I would like to follow the family in the new year. Su Changqing put down his chopsticks and pondered a little. He looked at the newly found daughter for the first time and frowned. What does mother mean? The old lady took the handkerchief handed over by the maid, pressed the corner of her lips, and said slowly, the family tree cannot be invited out until the clan leader and the elders of each family are here. It is approaching the end of the year and the weather is freezing. It is not good. At this time, all the elderly people are summoned because of a trivial matter. Grandma means to wait until a year later. Suye couldn't hold back his anger and was the first to ask. The Su family's legitimate daughter was found. How could it be a trivial matter if she wanted to be included in the family tree? I really don't know what happened to my grandmother. First, she was wrong that her younger sister was ranked after her adopted daughter, and now the family tree has pushed back. She is his biological sister and the only legitimate daughter of the Su family. Why should she suffer this injustice? Let's talk about it later in the year. As for announcing her identity and going out to socialize, This child has just arrived and is not familiar with the rules and etiquette of Kyoto. It's better to take it slow and don't scare her. The old lady said it matter of course, as if she was thinking about Suleun. Suwanner had a smile in her eyes and proudly rubbed the gemstone ring on her hand. With just one sentence, Suleun's life experience was difficult to identify and her identity could not be disclosed in Kyoto. She just wanted to tell Suleun that no matter what her legitimate daughter was, no matter how noble her status was, she could not compare to her after all. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 7. Chapter 7 Looking for Wenpo. Grandma, how can you be so partial? Suye put down his chopsticks, scratched his neck, and directly spoke back. How presumptuous, it's not your place to comment on what your elders say. Suhao slapped the table heavily, his eyes were cold and he scolded in a deep voice. You are so unfilial to your elders, how can you be worthy of being the heir apparent of the Ho mansion? As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned. Sun Jiaro looked at the husband she had relied on all her life in disbelief, wondering why he suddenly spoke so harshly. There is only one son in the Ho family, Suyet. If he is not worthy, who is? Master Ho said something serious, yet just cares about his sister, and his words were inappropriate at the moment. The old lady looked at her son in confusion, and then as if she remembered something, she smoothed things over, yet didn't mean anything. Suleun looked at Suho indifferently and sneered in his heart. What he said was not an angry word, but the truth. Indeed, Suho also did this in his previous life. He looked down on his brother because he had a good son outside. He was currently studying at the Royal Academy with Li Rui, who loved Suwanner wholeheartedly. Whether it's intentional or not, if it happens again, watch your skin carefully. After saying such a firm sentence, Suho stood up and went out without looking back. The old lady was also supported by Suwainer and returned to her yard. Only mother and son were left there. Suya looked at the direction they were leaving angrily, while Sun Jiaro had a sad look on her face and had to spare her efforts to comfort Suleun. Yunur, it's not that your father and grandmother don't like you, but... Before Sun Jiaro could finish speaking, Suleun smiled and shook her hand in relief. Mother doesn't need to explain, I know she loves me, that's enough. There is also a brother, and he loves you too. Suye stood up, sat next to Suleun, and held her other hand. Suleun nodded, looking at the people who were most important to her on the left and right, smiling sweetly and leaning on Sun Jiaro's shoulders like a baby. Having experienced the ups and downs of integration in her previous life, she didn't want to care about the opinions of irrelevant people. Look at my sister's facial features, they are exactly the same as my mother's. I don't know what my grandma and father have to be suspicious of. Suye still felt frustrated when he thought about it. He could even take good care of the children of the instigator's family, but why couldn't he be nicer to his biological daughter? When mentioning this, the smile that finally gathered on Sun Jiaro's face dissipated again. Suwainer's words aroused the suspicion in the hearts of her mother-in-law and her husband. How should her daughter gain a foothold in the Su family in the future? Mom, don't worry, I don't care. Suleun took Sun Jiaro's arm and shook her like a baby. In her previous life, she was always careful with the old lady in order to be included in the family tree. But in the end, it was her grandfather who came forward to celebrate her hairpin ceremony, and the Su family had to write her name on the family tree. In her next life, she no longer cares about those false reputations. Sun Jiaro was amused by Suleun's childish look and nodded her forehead lovingly. She was originally afraid that her daughter, who had been away for more than 10 years, would become unfamiliar with her when they suddenly met her. She never thought that Suleun was not afraid of strangers, but was actually caring and caring. It can be seen that blood is thicker than water. Silly boy, if you are not listed in the family tree, you are not the legitimate daughter of the Su family. Future marriage plans will be affected. Then my daughter will not marry, she will stay with her mother for the rest of her life and be filial to you. Suleun leaned in Sun Jiaro's arms charmingly, making her smile. Speaking like a child again. Sun Jiaro held her daughter tightly in her arms. If the Li family's incompetent son hadn't spilled the beans when they were drinking and fighting outside, the local magistrate who handled the human life case happened to have an old relationship with the Sun family and helped to keep an eye on the investigation. She doesn't know how long she will be deceived. Suleun felt warm in his heart when he saw that Sun Jiaro was still worried about his own affairs, and his nose couldn't help but feel sore. Since it was her mother's idea, she would help her achieve it. Mother, it's not difficult to prove that I am the daughter of the Su family. Oh, do you have any idea? Sun Jiaro's eyes lit up and she looked at her expectantly. Sun Jiaro is the only daughter of the Protector General's mansion. After marrying into the Su family, her inner house was clean, so she developed a soft-tempered temperament, which was why the Su family's mother and son took advantage of her. There is a red butterfly birthmark the size of a fingernail on my daughter's waist. It is very unique. I think MRS from back then will still remember it. After finishing her words, Sun Jiaro lowered her eyes. Her daughter had been switched since she was born. She knew nothing about the birthmark on her daughter, otherwise she would not have been fooled by the impostor for 14 years. Suya answered the call excitedly. My sister is smart. My brother will send someone to find Po Wen right now. There are only a few stable women in Kyoto who are skilled in delivering babies for the nobles. As long as you are willing to pay attention, you can always find them. Then it's hard work, brother. Suleun smiled with crooked eyebrows. She had a mother and brother who really cared for her and loved her. At this moment, she just felt that she was the happiest person in the world. It was ridiculous that in her previous life, she had been trapped in inferiority, sorrow, and unreal unrequited love. She failed to live up to her expectations. Someone who is really good to her. It's getting late, let's go, let's take your sister to see her yard so that she can rest early. Sun Jiaro got up and took Suleun to see her yard. Passing through a section of the veranda, the view gradually broadens, and when you look up, you can see the elegant plaque Kea Huaziazu. Seeing these 4 words, Suleun held back her tears. This plaque was mentioned by her mother herself. Every plant and tree in the yard, as well as the indoor ornaments and antiques, were all arranged by Sun Jiaro bit by bit. Half of her dowry was in. In his previous life, Suleun didn't know all the things going on here. He only cared that his yard was not as big as Suwainer's. For this reason, he often got angry with Sun Jiaro. After her mother passed away, Suwainer confiscated almost all the valuables in the yard. She was unable to protect her mother's relics and could only watch. Closed his eyes slightly, hiding the hatred in them. When he opened his eyes again, Suleun had returned to his previous calmness and calmness. Yunur, although this courtyard is a bit small, it's still elegant. Do you like it? Sun Jiaro looked at Suleun anxiously and guiltily. All the spacious courtyards in the mansion were already occupied, and only this one was left. She had no choice but to put in a lot of effort into the layout, hoping that Suleun would like it. Mom, I like it here very much. Suleun opened the door and looked at the antique jades on the ancient shelf, and his heart felt so soft. Seeing her playing with various ornaments fondly, Sun Jiaro breathed a sigh of relief and waved the servants to come forward to pay their respects to the lady. 6 girls with neat faces were kneeling on the ground in 2 rows. My slave, please give my regards to the lady. Everyone, get up. Suleun lowered his eyes and glanced at the girls kneeling on the ground. His eyes fell on the girl with a thin silver earring on the right side of the 2nd row, and he unconsciously revealed a sneer. These girls are all chosen by my mother to serve you. Aunt Zhang will also stay here, okay? Okay, thank you, mother. Then don't thank me, brother. Suye pointed to the pen, ink, paper and inkstone on the desk, as well as the guqin and chessboard, asking for credit. I have prepared these for you. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 8. Chapter 8, Setting Up Spies. Sulayun blessed his body obediently, smiling so hard that his eyebrows were crooked. Thank you, brother. Suye accepted this gift from her and only wanted to bring the best in the world to his sister. Sun Gro looked at the tiredness in Sulayun's eyes with pity, and softly ordered her servants. You all take good care of me, miss. If you let me know that you are not doing your best, I will not be merciful. The maids all said yes. Yunur, you've been running around for a few days, so go to bed early today. You'll have to pay your respects to your grandmother tomorrow morning. Sun Gro gave Grandma Zhang detailed instructions, and then reluctantly left with Suye. Seeing that his mother and brother were gone, the smile on Sulayun's face gradually faded, and his eyes faintly scanned the maids. Most of these people were bribed by Suwainer in the previous life and often caused her troubles. The old lady's lost family mutton fat bracelet appeared inexplicably under her pillow. Before going to the palace banquet, she had an inexplicable red rash on her face, which was embarrassing. All of these are indispensable for Suwainer's planning. In her next life, she wants everyone who has framed her to reveal their true colors one by one and get the punishment they deserve. Everyone has been tidying up the courtyard for a few days. You have worked hard. Please go down and rest early. Sulayun winked at Granny Zhang. Granny Zhang understood and rewarded each of them with a piece of silver. The girls filed out, and the room suddenly fell silent. Sulayun sat in front of the bronze mirror, letting Granny Zhang untie her hair. Her black hair was spread out, and she used a comb dipped in Osmanthus hair oil to smooth it down. This is the best way to take care of your hair. Mammy Zhang smiled and introduced the things on the dressing table, and explained in detail how the ladies of Kyoto took care of themselves and put on makeup. Miss, don't think I'm verbose, just stop now. Having combed her hair, Nanny Zhang felt guilty for talking too much and whispered her sin. The lady has just come to Su Mansion and is not familiar with anything. She talks too much, which may make her feel uncomfortable. Sulayun saw through her thoughts and comforted her with a smile. I know, Grandma is doing it for my own good. Grandma Zhang breathed a sigh of relief, and she fell in love with this concubine even more. Although she was raised in the countryside, she didn't have any sense of pettiness about her. On the contrary, she was more optimistic and transparent than the noble ladies in the capital. Mommy, let those girls wait outside for now. They are not allowed to enter my house. Mother Zhang understands. Miss is afraid. She is an old man from the Sun Mansion, and she has a lot of ambition in her heart. She has noticed early on that everyone in the Su Mansion has their own thoughts. Only his young lady is pure-minded and is planning for the Su Mansion, even at the cost of her own dowry. However, the mother and son only see her as a step up to the top, and there is no sign of any sincere love for her. It's important to be on guard against others. Yunur is new here, and a little bit of caution made Grandma laugh. Sulayun changed into his pajamas and carefully applied the skin-nourishing Kizai white cream on his face as Grandma said. The young lady is a strategist, so I can rest assured. Mammy Zhang exited the door with a look of relief on her face. Her young lady has a pure mind, and the eldest young master is a straight man. Now it's better. The young lady is planning for them, so they have nothing to fear. The next morning, the north wind blew light snow, which was blowing thinly and turning white. Sulayun got up early in the morning to dress up, and rushed to the old lady's yard at dawn to say hello. The old lady's courtyard is in the center of the Su Mansion. It is not only the largest place in the mansion, but it also has an earth dragon installed there. Suwainer was afraid of the cold, so she moved into the old lady's yard as soon as winter came. So she stood in front of the old lady to serve her early in the morning. Suwainer was wearing a goose yellow dress, which made her skin look like snow, and her temperament was elegant. However, the pink on her face could not cover up the dark green under her eyes. The old lady patted her hand lovingly, with a hint of distress and slight reproach in her tone. "It's just a small setback, but you can't stand it anymore. What do I teach you on a daily basis?" Suwainer's face turned pale when she was poked at the central issue, and she immediately knelt down to plead guilty. "It's my granddaughter who has a small measure." Before she could kneel down, the old lady held her shoulders and pulled her to sit next to her. "Don't worry, no one in this family can surpass your position in Grandma's heart." Suwainer wiped her red eyes and leaned in the old lady's arms aggrievedly. Before she could speak, a girl's voice came from outside. "Miss Yuner is here." Hearing this, Suwainer stood up and continued to stand beside the old woman to set the rules. Sulayun walked in, and the girl took off her red cloak, revealing the peach-pink dress underneath. The delicate pink color made her face look more like a peach blossom, adding a bit of spring color to the room. Staring at the face that had already shown its overwhelming beauty for the first time, Suwainer bit her lower lip, with a hint of jealousy in her delicate eyes. She knew that her appearance was mediocre, so she always dressed up to look elegant and pretty. Before, she didn't think it was a big deal without comparison. Now with Sulayun, her bright and charming little face becomes more and more dull compared to hers. The granddaughter pays her respects to her grandmother. Sulayun had a slight smile on his face, which was a blessing to his body. The old lady looked kindly, raised her hand to ask Sulayun to get up, and ordered the servant to bring her a thick cushion and hot tea. "It's hard for you to come to say hello so early in the cold weather. My granddaughter is scared. As a junior, this is what she should be doing." The old lady nodded and watched as Sulayun's eyebrows slowly softened. Although this child grew up in the countryside, he knew how to respect his elders. "Are you still adapting to Sumanshan?" The old lady took the ginseng tea from the maid, took a sip, and asked slowly. "This is my granddaughter's home, there's nothing wrong with it?" Sulayan kept his expression on his face and always had a light smile on his face, making it impossible to find anything wrong. The more outstanding she was, the tighter the handkerchief in Suwainer's hand tightened. When she saw the faint satisfaction in the old lady's eyes, she felt even more jealous and fearful. The newly dyed kodan nails dug into her palms, and the slight tingling sensation made her calm down a little. Rules and etiquette can be achieved quickly, but what about poetry, song, music, chess, calligraphy, and painting? She is known as the most talented woman in Kyoto. Could it be that she is no better than a country girl? Thinking of this, Suwainer's lips raised slightly. "It's been 2 days since Sister Yuner came back. Tomorrow is the day when Master is giving lectures. Why don't we ask my sister to come with me, Grandma, what do you think?" Suwainer's voice was gentle, and she regained the dignity of a high-class lady. "Well, what Warner said makes sense. Now that you are back, you must learn what you need to learn, and you can't be looked down upon by others." The old lady nodded, which was regarded as agreement. "Thank you, Grandma. Sister Yuner will study hard." Sulayun raised his eyebrows and looked at Suwainer. She was like this in her previous life and invited herself to listen and learn together. When she first came to the home mansion, Sulayun didn't know a word of Chinese characters and made all the jokes. In the end, she refused to study at home anymore. Later, it was Sun Gro who taught her little by little. In order to marry into the Hanlin mansion, Sulayun later worked hard. Now she is no longer the country girl that everyone can bully. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 9. Chapter 9, True and Fake Daughter of Gold. The family school is located in the liberal arts college at the front. In addition to our girls, We also have several brothers from your clan who are studying together. You have just started learning, so don't be impatient if you don't understand anything, come and ask your mother. Tomorrow is the day for homeschooling. Sun Gro looked at Suleun worriedly. This child grew up in the countryside and rashly entered homeschooling. How could he keep up? The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he became. Sun Gro held Suleun's hand and spoke as if she had made up her mind. Forget it, let's not study at home. I'll go find my mother-in-law and hire a gentleman to teach you alone. After saying that, Sun Gro stood up and was about to go out. Suleun hurriedly held her arm to stop her, and persuaded her with a smile. Mother, my daughter is not as bad as you think. Of course my daughter is the most outstanding, but... Sun Gro was afraid that Suleun would be unhappy, so she explained carefully. Before she could finish her words, Suleun interrupted with a smile, squeezing her shoulders thoughtfully and comforting her. Although my daughter grew up in the countryside, she has not read any books. Will the Li family hire a husband for you? Sun Gro looked unbelieving and thought her daughter was comforting her. She heard that Li's family was very poor and their livelihood was in question. How could they have the spare money to send a girl to school? There is also a private school in the village. After I am busy with family and farm work, I often go there to study secretly. Although I don't learn much, I don't know a single Chinese character. Yunur, I've suffered a lot from you these past years. Hold the hands that were massaging her shoulders. Sun Gro couldn't help but blush. No wonder Yunur's hands were so rough, not at all delicate as a girl's. If it weren't for the poisonous woman of the Li family, how could her daughter have suffered all this? Her daughter was kind-hearted and called the two old people the Li family's father and mother, and refused to let the Su mansion send the snake and rat nest into exile. In the previous life, the son of the Li family was sentenced to beheading for murder, and the two elders were exiled to the north. Although they deserved their punishment, Su Weiner often used this to build momentum to attack her. She did not care about nurturing kindness, and was vicious-hearted. Those in Kyoto who have Mary's disease will eat this, said. Su Weiner later became the princess, and within a year, she brought her biological parents back to Kyoto to enjoy their blessings. After King Yu ascended to the dragon throne, they became the heirs of the country and enjoyed all the glory and wealth. In this case, why should she do this again? It would be better to get a good reputation. When she avenges her previous life, she will naturally not be able to spare them. Mom, we won't mention them, it would be a spoiler of fun. Suleun winked mischievously at Sun Gro, then sat down at the desk, picked up the brush, and tried to write a few words. In her previous life, in order not to be looked down upon by others when she married into the Hanlin Palace, she worked calligraphy and managed to learn Sun Gro's hairpin-shaped regular script. Now Suleun did not dare to show his full strength, so he only wrote a few thousand-character essays crookedly. Mother, are you okay? Picking up the rice paper, Suleun pretended to be proud and ran to Sun Gro. Okay, just listening can do this in time, my daughter's talent will surely amaze the entire Kyoto. Sun Gro couldn't put it down after holding Suleun's calligraphy. Although the brush strokes were a little immature, the frame structure was handsome and elegant, which is everyone's way. Mother, are you relieved now? Suleun leaned in Sun Gro's arms and smiled sweetly. Don't worry. Sun Gro held Suleun in her arms and stroked her hair carefully, wishing that she could give her all the love she had gained in the past 10 years. The next morning, as the morning light faded, Suleun pushed away the quilt, stretched out warmly, and let Grandma Zhang dress her up in a daze. Our lady is really a natural beauty, but she is too thin. She would look better if she were rounder. Insert a piece of golden walking stick diagonally to complete the makeup. Suleun looked at the person in the mirror and nodded with satisfaction. Her eyebrows were swiped lightly, and her makeup was pink. However, after a few days of treatment, Her complexion improved a lot, and she was already showing the good looks of her previous life. Miss, Bai Tao is already waiting outside with a bookcase. How about letting her wait for you to go to school now? Mammy Zhang took the cloak from the girl's hand and put it on Suleun's shoulders, asking slowly. Let Chunxin go with me. Raising his eyebrows and looking at the girl who was eavesdropping outside the door, Suleun's eyes dimmed and he put people under her nose so that she could handle them. She wanted to retaliate for all the embarrassments Su Weiner had given her in her previous life. Going through the veranda and passing through a green bamboo forest, we arrived at the front yard to study. Suleun was stunned when he entered the door. He frowned slightly and felt a little blocked in his heart. Why was he here? In the front row, Li Rui sat next to Su Weiner, with a book spread out in front of him and looking at her with a look of obsession. With a slight snort, Suleun sat down at the seat furthest away from the two of them. She had suffered enough in the past life, and she didn't want to be disgusted by two people again. Sister Yunur, you are here. Su Weiner walked over with a faint smile and placed an exquisite mahogany box on her table. You were raised in the countryside before and have never read a book. My sister specially prepared a fine sheep's hair for you, which is most suitable for beginners. Suleun pushed the box open, his eyes were cold, and he glanced at Su Weiner. She was afraid that others would not know that she was a peasant girl who could not read a word, so she deliberately shouted loudly. She thought this would allow her to retreat from the difficulties. Wishful thinking. Thank you for your kindness, sister. Mother has prepared a good hoop pen for me. I don't dare to covet my sister's gift anymore. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Rui got up from his seat. As expected, I grew up in the countryside and don't know how to appreciate others. Sister Weiner, let's ignore her. Su Weiner timidly picked up the box on the table. With red eyes, she tucked Li Rui's sleeves and said pitifully, Sister, that's not what she meant. Don't say that to her. Looking at her peerless white lotus look, Suleun rolled his eyes hard in his heart. Su Weiner had played this trick many times in her previous life. Forcibly give her things that you don't need. If she accepts them, she will say that she is short-sighted. If she takes them away, she is disrespectful. Suleun raised her red lips and looked at Li Rui playfully, the ruthless man who had hurt her in her previous life. I wonder which clan brother this young master is. He actually interfered in the affairs between our sisters with just a pen. Sister Weiner didn't say anything, but the young master rushed forward to confess. With one sentence, Li Rui was pointed at Li Rui. Several sisters from the family present laughed softly, whispered, and pointed at Su Weiner and Li Rui. The legitimate daughter turned into an adopted daughter, and she actually still has the face to show off. It's very lively now. The legitimate daughter is someone else. I wonder how the marriage of the Li Hanlin family will be settled. I have long been disgusted with Su Weiner's condescending look. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 10. Chapter 10. From now on, there will be a good man to match her. Ignoring Li Rui's angry and resentful gaze, Suleun happily opened the Analects on the table. The master was sitting on the podium and had already started teaching. Apart from glaring at people, Li Rui did not dare to do anything else. Water can carry a boat, but it can also overturn it. You will all be state leaders who will ascend to the temple in the future. Who can tell you what you think about this sentence? The master stroked his beard gently and waved his long sleeves, which was quite the style of the Wei and Jin dynasties. The students each expressed their opinions, and the master listened to them one by one and nodded with satisfaction. Li Rui sat down, his eyes moved, and he spoke teasingly. Master, the second lady of the Su family hasn't spoken yet. The student wants to hear her opinions. He deliberately emphasized the word Jiajian in an extra strong way, just to embarrass Suleun. The master glanced at Suleun. He had also heard about the second young lady of the Su family. She was transferred to someone else when she was young and grew up in the countryside. Mrs. Ho specifically asked him to take more care of her. I'm afraid this guy doesn't even know a word of Chinese characters, and he doesn't even know what this sentence means, so how can he have any opinions? Just when the master was in a dilemma, Suleun stood up ying, with a clear and gentle voice. The people are the foundation of the country. Only when the people live well can the country last long. Changes in the world are a matter for the superiors, but it is the people who suffer. Only when the people live well can the rule last long. After saying this, the master's eyes showed admiration. He came down from the platform, walked to Suleun, picked up the words written on her desk, and marveled. Miss Leun has unique insights, which really impresses me. Growing up in the countryside, there is no vulgarity or vulgarity at all. What is even more rare is that he has extraordinary experience. Everyone also looked at Suleun with amazement and exclaimed in low voices. They thought that the country girl could not even read a single big character and were waiting to see her jokes. However, they did not expect that Suleun could actually write well. No wonder the Su mansion had written a few words before. Gossip spread. It is said that Suleun is also a fake, not the legitimate daughter of the Su family. From this point of view, it must not be groundless. She does not look like a country girl. Suleun knew what everyone was thinking, so he spoke calmly and explained. Although the students grew up in the countryside, after they were busy with family and farm work, they would often go to the private school to listen in overtime. They also learned a little bit. The master nodded, the admiration in his eyes getting stronger and stronger. This was enough for just listening. Now that he is a famous scholar in Kyoto, he may be able to get the first prize, but it is a pity that she is a woman. Poor and perseverant, eager to learn and never lazy, very good. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone's expressions changed from contempt to sympathy and appreciation. If Suwano's mother hadn't done evil, how could the legitimate daughter of the Su family be reduced to doing menial work in the farmhouse? Only Li Rui disdained to sneer. I have done such lowly things as household chores and farm work. I am not ashamed but proud of it. I am indeed a pariah. Hearing this, the master's slightly wrinkled eyebrows knitted together. Before he could speak, Suleun responded rudely. I dare to ask this young master, if there were no untouchables to work, where would a basket of food, a gourd of water, a strand of flax and a skein of silk come from? The young master was born in a noble family, but apart from this family background, has he ever done anything good for the country and the people? After Suleun finished speaking, applause came from the door, and then a clear and gentle male voice sounded. Suye led King Jin in. Seeing Prince Jin, Suleun's eyes moved slightly and he turned his face away. They had met twice in total, and both times were unpredictable. The reason for visiting this time was unknown. Suye, what your sister said is really heartwarming. When King Jin entered the door, everyone stood up and saluted him. See His Royal Highness the King of Jin. Everyone, please get up. There is no need to be so polite outside the palace. After saying that, he walked up to Suleun with a smile on his face and helped him up with his own hands. Ms. Su, we meet again. Thank you, Your Highness. With a smile on his face, Suleun took 2 steps back without leaving a trace, deliberately keeping a distance. Seeing her little move, King Jin smiled carelessly, turned his head and continued talking to Suye. Let's go to the front and don't disturb master's teaching here. Suye's eyes were warm, and he glanced at his sister with pride and joy, and then left reluctantly. After school, Suleun was accompanied by Chun Seeing back to his courtyard. When he entered, Sun Gro was already waiting in the main hall, looking out anxiously. Mother. Suleun lifted up her skirt and ran to Sun Gro with a smile. Sun Gro held her daughter in her arms and looked up and down, with a look of uneasiness on her face. How are you in school today? It's very good, the master even praised me. Seeing her daughter smiling with crooked eyebrows, Sun Gro finally let go of her worries that she had been worrying about for a long time. He pulled his daughter to sit next to him, dismissed the servants, and talked about himself. "Have you seen Mr. Lee?" Suleun nodded and finally asked the question in his mind, "Why does he come to our school with a foreign surname?" Men and women's defense is still there. In order to climb the Master Li Lao Hanlin, Suho really did everything. The gentleman from the Royal Academy went out to travel and temporarily came to our house to study for 2 days. His master also taught him, and there were many brothers and sisters with him. What does it matter? Sun Gro tapped Suleun's forehead with half fondness and half hatred. She was a half-grown girl who was pregnant with spring, but she was more old-fashioned than adults like them. What do you think of young Master Li? Suleun has suffered so many years outside and finally returned to her. How could Sun Gro not think more about her? Li Rui, the eldest son of the Li Hanlin family, has been engaged in a baby marriage with the eldest daughter of the Su family since he was a child. Now that the eldest daughter returns, this marriage should belong to her daughter. Li Rui is handsome, smart, and eager to learn. He is one of the best among the elites in Kyoto in terms of his family background and talents. In time, he will become a great person. She would feel relieved if her daughter was entrusted to such a well-informed family. Tell me, are you still shy with your mother? Sun Gro saw her daughter was silent for a long time, so she smiled and teased her. Suleun pondered for a long time, thinking about how to dispel her mother's idea of making random moves, when hearty laughter suddenly came from outside the door. "Mother, please don't embarrass my little sister, that Li Rui is not worthy of her at all." Suye walked in carelessly. Thinking of Li Rui's condescending attitude just now, he wanted to beat him up. He didn't show his virtue by peeing in the urine, and he dared to call his little sister a pariah. King Jin followed him through the door and heard clearly what the mother and son said. Sun Gro stood up immediately when she saw him coming in. "Auntie, there is no need to be polite. Suye and I feel like brothers. We finished talking to Mr. Marquis in the front and came here to visit you specially." Before Sun Gro could perform the ceremony, he was stopped by King Jin and sat down on the main throne. His words attracted Suye's side eyes. He didn't know that his relationship with Prince Jin was so good. This guy was talking to his father like a prince just now. Why did he change his face when he got to the back house? Hole. Facing those dark and calm eyebrows, Suleun's eyes flickered, blessing his body and saying hello. King Jin looked at the slender girl in front of him with a smile. She looked a bit frail but had bright features and a sense of resilience. Sister Yunar has just been found. There is no need to worry about the marriage. There will be a good man worthy of her in the future. End of this chapter.